Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
How are you?
I'm doing fine.
You going to go back to being just Citizen Paul after you're done here?
Well, I'd have trouble sitting still. I hope I can still be active and participate in the discussion that I've been interested in, and so far so good. But I've had a little bit of time to relax, too.
We seem to be having just a little bit of an erosion in that whole freedom and smaller government thing going on here.
Well, how do you mean?
Well, we want if we're the only ones noticing this, but it seems like we've got a king instead of a president who's just up there telling us how it's going to be.
Oh yeah, well, they have been eroding up there for a long time, so I don't think much about that city up there and the political process of the two parties. But the freedom movement for me is outside of Washington. It's with a different group of people. It's with a new generation. It's what's on the internet. And that is where I see the growth and the interest and the enthusiasm. So if I look at outside of Washington, I think there's lots to be optimistic about. If you look at Washington, D.C. and the budgetary process and what they do on a day-to-day basis, you can get pretty depressed over that. So I have to look to the positive things. And I think there are some positive things. But on the short run, I don't think they're going to straighten the mess out up in Washington. So I'm sort of anticipating a time when there will be major decisions made, because this system we have today isn't viable. It's going to get a lot worse. And I'm just hoping we have enough numbers to put it back together again with some common sense, rather than saying, well, what we need is more government. We need the United Nations to come in and take care of us. Because
I think that's the plan, isn't it?
We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, that's the group that we're competing with. But let's hope the American people wake up. I mean, we go to international organizations already. We ask them about trade and monetary policy and welfare problems when you go to war. And I'm sort of old-fashioned on that. I think that should be a national issue, and government should be close to home. And so we have a lot of work to do. I'm not complacent at all to think that it's going to be an easy fight, but I am encouraged to think that a lot of people are starting to wake up and realize that this is not sustainable. And anybody who thinks, oh yeah, we'll go along with the Paul Krugmans of the world and just print a lot of money and that solves everybody's problem, it's verging on insanity as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that's kind of the plan. We just print a little more money. It's not real money. It doesn't matter. You can print as much of it as you want.
Well, Mr. Paul or Dr. Paul, a lot of people here at the Walter Johnson Show are constantly asking us, what are we going to do about it? We point out these problems all day long. What are we going to do about it? Is there a leader out there that will risk losing whatever it is they're going to lose? Will that somebody be you that will step up and just charge ahead, fight this fight, and say, follow me, we'll take them down?
Yeah. Well, I hope we have a lot of people like that, and that's where I think our numbers of growing. I think it's the endorsement of ideas that's more important than one person, because you could have the perfect president, and he wants to lead the charge. But if the people say, no, we love these wars, we should start one with Iran right now, and we agree with Keynesian economics and we agree with the Federal Reserve. So if people's attitudes are like that, and in general they still are, they endorse, both political parties endorse the idea that the government should do these things. They should be the safety net, and we should be the policeman of the world.
Well, I've
so
heard
one person can present the case, but you got to convince people that we're doing the wrong things, and that's where I think our numbers are growing.
I hear from the media that the Tea Party is pretty much done.
The worst.
That it's over now.
The worst thing there is.
Is the Tea Party dead?
Well, I think in many ways it's undermined itself, because if people were honest and looked at where it started, it started in 2007 during our first presidential campaign. It was spontaneous. It perked up. It had certain views, and then the Republican organizations came in, and they say, hey, there is a Tea Party movement there. We got to go in there and sort of take over. And in many ways, it became an arm of the Republican Party. But as far as I'm concerned, the original organization, which was spontaneous, is still there. There is still a large group of people who are studying and reading and know about Austrian economics. They study the Federal Reserve. They know why we should bring our troops home. And that group of people isn't, they were part of the Tea Party. The Tea Party undermined it. But that group of people who believe this way still exists, and those numbers are growing. But once the Tea Party all of a sudden had national leaders, which became an arm of the Republican Party, they sort of undermined themselves.
Exactly.
I think it was
It
was Henry Ford that said that if the people knew the workings of the Fed and our monetary stuff, if they really knew what was exactly going on and really understood it, they would be in the streets tomorrow.
I believe it, but compared to 5 years ago, millions of people know now that the Fed has, a significant responsibility on the chaos they've caused. It's a special interest that bails out banks. Bernanke dealt with $15 trillion during the 08-09 crisis, and did he bail out the homeowners? No, they lost their jobs and their houses. This money went into the big banks, the foreign governments, and we still stand there to back up the whole system. But it's what the amazing thing is how much trust they still put in us, the United States, that we'll be able to be the policeman of the world forever, and that as long as we print money, we can loan it to foreign governments, and they'll keep buying our bonds and finance our extravagance. Well, that is the decision when that's coming to an end, and nobody can predict when that will happen. But the Fed is the culprit, and this is why Jackson and Jefferson struggled so hard to keep us from doing this. And then Lincoln wanted to have the central bank again, and we've been back at this forever. But they will self-destruct. I mean, there's been no system like this that was maintained for long periods of time, and this one's amazing that it's been lasting. But there will come a time, and I don't think it's that far off, where confidence will be lost and foreigners will quit. Foreigners have essentially quit buying our mortgage debt. And they're still buying our Treasury debt, but they don't buy that mortgage debt. And who's buying it now? It's the Fed that's buying it, like $1 trillion worth of bad mortgage debt. Mm-hmm. And how do they buy it? They create money out of thin air, but it really doesn't help the average person. And there's a saying in Austrian economics, when you deliberately destroy a currency, what you do is you destroy the middle class, and that is so true. Just look at what's happening to our middle class. And the rich aren't getting poorer. The rich are doing quite well. But this will cause a lot of anger to arise, and then it will stop. But this is why it's so important for people to say, what kind of government do we want? Do we want a government that's supposed to take care of us from cradle to grave, or do we want a very limited government to protect our liberties?
When the crash starts happening, and how do we keep from going into total chaos, and how does something arise out of this that has a semblance of going back to where we were?
Yeah, and that is the key question, and it's a toss-up. We're better off now than we've been in 30 years. I started talking about this in the 70s. Much better off now. In the last 5 years, much better off. We have the internet now. We have good radio shows that'll talk about this. So we're moving in that direction. But it still goes back to what the people understand to be important. So that's where we're winning. But they won't go without a fight. Believe me. They will come with the guns to take our guns, and they'll do whatever they can, and they will want to make use of the chaos. But there's no reason to think that we can't. I think we'll do much better with our collapse than, say, the Soviets did. The Russian government and the Russian people now has not exactly gone back to Jeffersonian democracy or a republic. But I think we have a better chance because we have a better tradition of sound money and property rights and contracts. But we have to awaken the people.
Do you own guns? Are there guns in the Ron Paul household?
I would think I could search a run, and I may well have one or two, but I don't like this idea that, matter of fact, concealed carry always bothered me too. And you can see why. They have a list of it, and they put you on a map and say, oh, he has a gun in that house. So I think that I think people should have a natural right to defend themselves. And if they haven't hurt anybody, they should be allowed to own the weapon. And in Texas, I would say that the tradition in Texas has been, it was always assumed people have guns in their houses.
Yeah, buddy.
The police don't protect us. The police in the inner city, that's where the most violence is. If you live outside the city, the assumption is that there's probably a gun in that house.
That's right.
And it's that assumption that gun is probably there that provides most of our safety.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
In our whole state.
Criminals don't obey laws. So
have they ever? Has the government ever enacted? Have they ever created one law that the criminals will obey? When they write that law down, I'm gonna go ahead and get behind that one. Make me a law that the criminals will obey.
Well, it sort of helps them. They know what the law-abiding citizens are going to be doing, so it enhances it. I mean, even some of the criminals and the former criminals say, hey, this is a great map. I'm not going into that house. I know they have a gun, So the assumption should be that everybody has one, and where's the evidence to show that people who own guns legally and are peaceful, how many of those guns actually have been used in crime? It's always, where are the strongest laws? D.C., strongest drug laws and the strongest gun laws, and that's where the most violence is. So, and I don't know how they get away with this whole idea of terrorizing the nation.
I know how they get away with it.
How do they get away with it?
Television.
The
TV news people, they just tell us that we're obviously too dumb to question it. They tell us what we're supposed to think, and most people do.
I think Herman Cain summed it up, though.
I think that's exactly right. And when I started in the 70s, there were 3 major networks, and that was it.
Yeah.
But today, right now, the people between 18 and 30, about 80 or 90% of them get their news from the internet. They don't even watch the TV anymore. So that's why we have to use every vehicle possible to reach people, and we can compete with the 3 majors.
Well,
right now, pardon me?
All of those television networks, CNN, ABC, they all have internet sites too. What part of the internet these young people are looking into?
Right. If they read the Huffington Post, they have a completely different idea of the world than if they read Drudge Report and Breitbart, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, we have to compete with them with the same tools, but we had no tools before, essentially. So I think internet and talk radio and these different things, we at least have a vehicle. When I gave my last speech on the House floor, I said what my greatest concern was, and I said it was the undermining of civil liberties. Because all these issues, whether it's financial or foreign policy and violence and all these things, if we don't have the chance, if you are ever curtailed on what you can say on the radio, or I'm curtailed on the meetings that I hold, that's when we're in big trouble. Or the internet gets regulated, so we who want to use it to our use, that would be a very bad sign. So I think protection of civil liberties, which I think so often conservative Republicans are pretty weak on. Sometimes they don't want to protect civil liberties like they should.
Could we ask you a favor? Since we don't get to talk to Ron Paul very often, so I thought maybe we'd ask you. You know people in Washington and powerful places. I mean, they'll probably take your call, whether they agree with you or work with you or not. Could you ask them to put us back on the radio in Houston?
Because we know some powers that work behind the scenes.
Yeah, you mean somebody in the government took you off?
Well, they talked to somebody who talked to somebody. They gave the word, it trickled down, and then a guy here at the radio station came in. He goes, "It's out of my hand, guys. I got to take you out."
We have hundreds and hundreds of licenses, and they said that they would look on them more favorably if you didn't have stuff like this.
Well, then it's already getting down to the wire. The things I've been worried about, it's already happening.
It's happening right now in front of us, and it's happening to us. That's the worst part of all.
Dr. Paul, we got to go. We got to go to the break because we're late. But what's that book you wrote a few years ago about the Fed?
End the Fed.
That's a book people should read.
End the Fed.
Right.
Appreciate your time, buddy.
Okay, sure thing. Good to be with you.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it. We'll be back.
Fun, F-U-N, finally understanding nothing.
Oh my God, you're so cute when you don't know what you're talking about.
Walton and Johnson.